Hello, everyone. This is Chris Miles here. Hey, I'm a cash flow expert, and I'm the financial advocate for the entrepreneur here as founder and CEO of Money Ripples. Hey, I'm excited to have you here today because this is going to be so much fun. This is seriously probably my favorite webinar that I do each year. And it's always about this time because I know that it's last minute, you're getting to the end of the year, and you're probably not even thinking about taxes at this point, which is exactly why we need to be thinking about taxes. Because if you're at a place where you know that you're making more money, you know that you're possibly be overpaying the taxes year after year after year, which, by the way, if you make any money in business, I can promise you, you are. These are things that we got to make sure it's done last minute. So this is kind of, I do this even earlier towards the end of the year just because I know there's time to get this done and you may not be able to get it done. So anyways, excited to have you guys on. We had a ton of people register for this, whether you're watching this live right now or you'll be watching this recorded. Welcome. Love to welcome you out and love to be able to have you here with us today. So let me ask you, how many of you guys on here that are live right now, how many of you are excited to get things going? How many of you guys really want to find some ideas to save taxes here in the next few minutes? Let's just see you type in, make sure we can see it okay. I do. Me. All right, Mary Kay. Good. Awesome. Okay, good. It looks like everybody's ready to go. Okay, good. So I'll tell you, let me tell you a story because this is something that I've learned just being a cash flow expert. For those of you that don't know me, I started out being a financial planner. I started out doing the traditional line of work. I started doing the typical thing where I'd say you'd save all your money, spend nothing, sacrifice your whole entire lives that someday you might be able to retire. What I found, though, is that as I started to see people that were wealthy, they didn't teach differently, but they taught the exact opposite of what it really is in truth. And so as a result, in 2006, I actually left being a financial advisor, said I'm done, no more. I cannot teach this stuff anymore because it doesn't work. It doesn't help people. It doesn't even help financial advisors. I mean, even they can't retire doing the things that they're telling you to do. So I left that. I said, I'm going to take the route the millionaires take. So I actually had my own business. And ironically enough, I was working only a few hours a week, and I was actually able to retire when I was 28 years old, working just a few hours a week. And I didn't have to join any business. It was actually a business I had with myself, and it was a very low-key business. In fact, I was keeping it very secret, very private, because I didn't want people to keep asking me questions. I didn't want to, I didn't want to be interrupted, so to speak, right? And plus, I didn't know half the things how I was doing what I was doing, and it was a fun experience. But over that period of time, I realized that in business, especially those of you that are business owners, you got the best tax advantages available to you. You got some of the coolest things that you can possibly do. And the sad thing is, you're not taught it. And the one thing that I've taught that over and over, see, the way I was able to retire wasn't because I saved up a lot of money. Everybody thinks I had to save millions of dollars and live off the interest. That's false. That's what every bank or financial institution wants you to do. So you'll save your money with them, they can make all the money off your fees, and then you just live off the interest or even less than the interest, and they can keep making money. But what I found was that as I started to focus on cash flow, meaning that my income's up here and my expenses are down here, and this gap that creates this freedom. This is where freedom lies. If your income's down here and your expenses are up here, this is bondage. This is being trapped. This feels like you're not even paycheck to paycheck, like you're drowning, you're sinking, right? I mean, how many of you guys, who prefers better income over expenses? Who wants that? And who would rather have more expenses? Who wants more income? Type it in. I'm asking you such hard questions at the beginning of the day, aren't I? So obviously this is what we want. This is like profit in a business term, right? I call this cash flow. This is what really creates freedom. It's not the money you save up, it's how much cash flow you have. How much difference is there? And that's how I was able to retire. When all of a sudden the income streams I had coming in, almost passively, was coming in more than my expenses, that created freedom. I didn't need millions of dollars. Like I said, I had $2,000 in my checking account when it happened. I had a really good month. Maybe I had a few thousand more, but it was like 3,000 or 4,000 max that I had in my account, and that was it. It was purely the income streams coming in that was able to keep me going. And the one thing that's one of the biggest expenses I see business owners have, especially as you make more and more money, are taxes. And I just looked at one of my friend's tax bills. He showed me. He's like, "Oh my gosh, Chris, this is horrible." And he showed me his quarterly tax bill of $37,000. How many of you guys would absolutely hate to have a $37,000 quarterly tax bill? That's not annual. That's just for the 3 months. How many of you guys would hate that, right? So And the problem is because he wasn't writing off everything he could. I knew that. And there's tax strategies that are really developed for you guys, especially if you're a business owner. These are the best strategies you can use. And the sad thing is you're probably going to learn more in the next few minutes than you've ever learned from your accountant in the last several years. That's why everybody keeps telling me over and over. They say, Chris, like I've learned more in this last little bit than I've ever learned. And the reason is because I like to dumb it down. And then two, I'm not an accountant. In fact, let me reiterate that. I am not an accountant. I never want to be one. I don't like to be an accountant. I'm not a numbers nerd. I'm nothing like that. I don't expect you to be a numbers nerd. It's like, purely as a disclaimer, I'm not an accountant. This is something where you need professional advice to get the real situation for you and your situation. But I figured if the next few minutes or so we're playing together here, if you get to learn a few tips that saves you thousands of dollars, hopefully before the end of this year, or at least into the next year's tax bill, hey, that makes it well worth your time. Would you agree? So, obviously we know that Uncle Sam wants you, right? We know that. It's funny because people say, I'm worried about getting audited. Well, here's the funny thing I think is interesting. How many of you have ever seen the IRS come back to you and say, you know what, Mary Kay, you've been great, you've paid taxes, but you know what, you've actually paid too much in taxes. I'm sorry, you've paid way too much in taxes. We need to audit you so we can see how much we owe you, right? We have a refund for you, so we need to audit and figure out how much that is. Have any of you guys ever heard that before? No, of course not. No IRS agent will ever say, I need to audit you because you've overpaid on your taxes, right? It's always been, hey, we're going to audit you because we're wondering if you haven't paid all the taxes you've paid. We just want to make sure you're doing the books right. And by the way, the goal of the IRS is to get you at least once over your lifetime. And so the things I'm teaching you here, this is really not about trying to be sly or slick. I had somebody saying, hey, Chris, you're just trying to teach people how to like cheat their way out of taxes. No, absolutely not. I'm looking for absolutely legal, legitimate ways that are in the tax code that you can take advantage of, just a few ideas, so you could save at least $3,000 to $5,000 a year, minimum. Because the thing is that ultimately, I want more money staying in your pocket. I want it to be for you and your family. Because the thing is, I love cash flow. I love when you guys have more of it, because when you have more cash flow, you have more options in your life. When you have more options, you have more freedom, you have more free time, and you even relax more, and so you become more powerful in your business, and then you show up better, and then you make more money on top of it, and it's this whole cycle that creates more abundance and prosperity in your life right now. And so I want to minimize your taxes legally and legitimately and morally and ethically so that you can have more. Does that sound good to you guys? And like I said, like the average person, the average client I've worked with, most save between $5,000 and $10,000 in a year. That's each year. The biggest one I've seen, a client of mine, he saved $220,000 when we did a tax review of some of the stuff. Or actually no, that wasn't a tax review. The tax review I've seen over $100,000 several times. For this guy, it was $220,000 over a period of about 5 years that he's going to save. He was floored. By the way, I've had people that said, like, Chris, I've got the best accountant around. I had one lady that told me that she had, I don't want to say his name, a famous actor that you guys would all know. She had the same accountant as him out in California, and we ended up finding about $100,000 for her. But like I said, the average person that's profitable in business will find between $5,000 and $10,000. And the more you make in business, usually the more we find. So I love it. I love when every year when I do this webinar, there's always at least one of you on here that says, hey, Chris, I think I'm overpaying. Like, I'm making more this year, and I'm kind of scared. And every year I get somebody that right around the holidays say, hey, let's get you in, let's get things moving. And guess what? We find over 10 grand in savings. And I'm like, cool, sweet. And that was awesome. We're just getting warmed up, right? So here's the good news. You don't have to be a numbers nerd. You don't have to be a genius at taxes to do this. These are very common sense, simple steps that you can take. In fact, I don't want you to become a numbers nerd because I want you to do what you do best as a business owner in your business. One of the key things that I teach is that to truly be abundant, you have to come from a steward perspective. You have to come from a steward perspective. See, there's a spender perspective, which we know about. On the spender side, you see there, spenders blow money, right? They blow it. So even if they get a tax return or they reduce their taxes, they're going to blow it some way. I don't want that. If you're more of a saver on the saver side, see, savers are great at saving, but the thing is, it's always from a place of scarcity. You can never save enough. You can never reduce your taxes low enough. You're always going to be in fear and scarcity. In fact, you probably won't do anything in a saver mentality, because I'll get people to say, these are great ideas, Chris, but I'm just so scared. I'm not sure if this will work. I don't know. Well, then keep overpaying for another year. I actually know of one, a guy that's a dentist here in Utah. His daughter said, man, he needs you so bad. His accountant has told him for 20 plus years not to even get a corporation set up. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Meaning he's been overpaying tens of thousands of dollars each year. I mean, imagine that. That's easily hundreds of thousands of dollars so far, if not into the millions of dollars he's overpaid in taxes unnecessarily, right? And that's because a lot of accountants, they're number crunchers. They're passive accountants. Here's the thing is that how many of you have an accountant, you send your numbers in at the end of each year, and then they spit you back a number, either it's a tax return, if you're an employee, you might get a tax return. If you're a business owner, you're going to get a tax bill most likely, right? They're going to say, here's your tax bill, or maybe here's a tax return. And that's pretty much it. I mean, how many of you guys would say you have more of a passive accountant where they're good people, but they just kind of take your numbers and then spit them out and give you the bill? How many of you guys are like that? Type in if that's you. We got lots of people typing here. Pretty much, yep. Yeah, it's an overwhelming majority. That's pretty typical. And it's not that they're not good, and it's not that they're not good people, but what happens is that they just get caught up. They're just so busy doing their work that they forget to teach you along the way. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've vetted out accountants for years because I don't do the accounting. I refer my clients to accountants to be able to do the work, right? And it took me years. I've been spending over 10 years developing the team that I have. And I'll tell you, it is hard. I mean, with all the accountants that approach me and CPAs, it's hard to find a good one that, one, gets that steward perspective, which is a business owner perspective, because they got to think like a business owner, not like an accountant. Because if they don't, they're going to tell you to do dumb things with your money. And then two, they got to actually teach you. So one, they got to be good with a business owner perspective and a steward perspective and an abundance paradigm, not a scarcity saver paradigm. And two, they got to be able to say, hey, I'm going to teach you how to actually save taxes before the end of the year, not after the fact when you've already paid your bill, right? So that's the thing. And Camille, I agree with you as well. There's a lot of people that end up just doing their own research and finding out more information than their accountant teaches them, and that's just wrong. So I'm going to try to teach you here in the next few minutes. You guys ready for a few tips here? You good to go? All right. So let's start with number one. I'm going to start out with really simple stuff that I know anybody could do. By the way, just as a bonus here, just a little PS. If you do not have a business, but maybe you're contemplating it, I recommend you at least get a side business. Get something. Even if you're a sole proprietor, as something just to start, as a hobby or whatever it might be, get a business, because there are so many things you can write off that you couldn't write off normally. And by the way, if you're an employee for a company, is it possible you can become a contractor and be 1099'd and then have them pay your business, which can actually give you a lot of tax advantages? I've had a few clients do that where I said, hey, why don't you get 1099'd, through the company that you work for? Well, they allow it. Sometimes they'll only let you be a full-time employee, but sometimes they'll let you be a contractor, and that can be really cool. So number one, this is something that anybody can do, is mileage and travel. This is interesting because in a few weeks I'm actually going to be traveling myself. I'm going through, 4 or 5 states I'm going to be traveling through kind of close to Thanksgiving. I'm going to be, so here's a cool thing you could do. Any travel, any mileage that you do, mileage is roughly about, depending on gas and everything else, mileage is roughly about 56 cents to the mile. So that means if you travel 10,000 business miles, that means you can write off $5,600, give or take. That's a pretty amazing thing, to reduce your income by $5,600 for free. That's more, even with the tax savings, you're probably going to end up saving more than what you spend in gas, depending on the vehicle, of course. And there's other things too. If you have like a big truck and things like that, there's some ways to get additional tax benefits. There's even tax benefits of whether you lease or finance. There's all kinds of things there that, depending on your situation, could save you more money. But for everybody here, mileage is a very important thing to track. If you're driving almost all business miles, I like to keep separate cars. So if you're using a car mainly for business, I actually track the miles that are personal and then subtract that from the total amount on my odometer from year beginning to year end. If you're using it for both, you want to definitely track, like what Catherine says, you want to track the miles. Just have a little pen and paper there, just track, say, the date, and the number of miles you did, and that's good. Ooh, another bonus here. It also helps that if you write in your calendar what you're doing, so if you ever do get audited and they want to tell you, hey, how do we know these are legitimate miles? You can say, hey, here's my Google Calendar or whatever calendar system I use. Here it is. This is what I was doing that day. That would show you the miles I'm doing. So definitely track mileage. But here's my favorite part, because that's the easy stuff. My favorite part is what I call bizcations. So bizcations are where I do vacations and business. So the reason I'm going to Idaho, California, Oregon, and Washington in a couple of weeks is because, one, I'm speaking in Idaho for a direct sales group. And then from there, I head through Nevada to go to California, where I'm meeting with a guy that's going to discuss image and styling and things like that, also business related. And then from there, I'm going to Oregon and Washington, where I'll see a lot of my family, but I'm going to be visiting maybe even some of you. If you're out there in that direction, I might even be visiting some of you guys in that point. And so we're doing all those kind of things. And here's the cool thing. I'm going to be gone for roughly about 10 days. The key is, if you want to write off the entire trip, you got to have more than half of those days have some sort of business involved in that day. So, for example, if it's 10 days, 6 of those days need to have some sort of business. It could be a few minutes or half an hour or whatever, but as long as you've got some sort of business going on for 6 or more of those days during those 10 days, you can write it off. If you're gone for 3 days, it needs to be 2 days that you have some sort of business activity. If you're gone for 5, it needs to be 3. If you're gone for 4, it needs to be 3. It has to be over half. It has to be more than half. But if you do that, you write off food, lodging, as well as anything like airport, like flights or anything else. Like, you can write off all those kind of things. Any travel expense you can do can be written off if you have a business activities at least half of those days. So even though I'm going to be visiting family, granted, I have family that I do business with as well, so I can even do some things where I do a consult with some of those people too, right? But I could also do things where I'm meeting up with potential clients. I can meet up with other people. Ooh, here's a bonus for you. Maybe some of you guys are thinking, hey, we need to do a family vacation here pretty soon. What if I bring my family? The answer is yes. Some people say, well, is it possible to write off Disneyland or Disney World? The answer is yes, it's possible, as long as there's some sort of business purpose behind it. Now, it doesn't have to be only business. That's the key, because, come on, think of how many corporate executives you know that have play while they do business. I mean, it's no different for us as small business owners. But when you go to Disneyland, one thing I love about Disneyland is that it's one of the best places to learn how to create an experience economy. I mean, think about when you go to Disneyland. I mean, bring a pen and paper with you if you want to write this off. One, you can meet people there, whether they're clients, potential clients, or customers, whatever. You can meet people there. Or 2, you can start using it as research for your business. Because look at Disneyland. I mean, do they create an experience or what? I mean, your kids are going crazy. Your feet are tired and sore, but you love it too. You're thinking, oh, this is so cool. Like, I love this place. Well, after 3 days, you might not love it as much. The happiest place on earth might be the sorest place on earth, right? But while you're there, bring a pen and paper. You might say, hey, I'm going to take note. What is the experience like? What is it like at the gate? What do they do? Do they play music? Which obviously they do. What kind of music are they playing? What does that do to help make you feel excited? How can I use that in my business? Can I use music or certain types of music in my business? What are the smells and the foods that they cook that make you say, I'm going to pay $10 for a Tootsie Roll or whatever, right? Like, I don't know why you'd cook a Tootsie Roll. Anyways, those kind of things, right? Like, all those sort of things you could do. Say, hey, I want to take note of all this. I've never gone to Legoland, but you could probably do the same thing at Legoland. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could do. You might even do a vacation. Hey, I've gone to places where I've stayed at really nice resorts to say, hey, maybe this is a place I want to do an event. In fact, I just did a mastermind group with some of my clients, a VIP mastermind, where we went to a retreat. Hey, I wanted to check it out and make sure I liked it first. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to stay there and check it out and see how it works. That's all a write-off. Okay, so I've chatted a lot. For those of you that are on live right now, how many of you got at least one good idea from that, just from that little section? Good. Got a lot of yeses. Got about 8. That's great, Destin. Bizcations. Yep, I love that term. That's just my own little term. I don't know where I came up with it. It's just what I call it. Awesome. All right, let's move on to number 2. So number 2 is a corporation, setting up a corporation in your business. For those of you that are on live as well, how many of you have a corporation, whether it be an LLC or like an S corporation, something like that? How many of you guys have that? Let's take a poll. We got a couple LLCs. LLC, great. Not yet. Awesome. Soon S Corp, cool. Sole proprietor, all right. S Corp, good. So we got all kinds of mix here. So let's talk about this. I'm going to do this from a very dumbed down perspective. Now, first and foremost, let me give you some key advice here. When you're setting up a corporation, do not have your accountant set it up for you. If your accountant sets it up for you, that is practicing law without a license. Have an attorney set up the corporation for you. Make sure it's done right. You want to make sure you have the right bylaws. Most accountants, when they're doing this, they usually just take some random template and they try to apply it to your business. And if it's not legit, if you ever get taken to court where you're getting sued, which a corporation you want to have first and foremost just to protect you in case of lawsuits, if you go there and the judge says, hey, this isn't not even a legitimate corporation for your type of business, they're going to pretend like that business doesn't exist, and then all of your assets are now, as well as your future income, could be taken away from you. So I want to reiterate that do not have an accountant set it up for you. If they did, they're doing you a disservice. Have an attorney do it for you. Then the accountant can then help you to figure out what's the best tax liability you can use to be able to get the best results, the best tax benefits. So the cool thing is you want to get them to work together. Unfortunately, accountants and attorneys do not work well together. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but they usually butt heads about what's the best thing for you. And then what usually ends up happening, either you make no decision or you go with the person that just seems most passionate about it, which could be very dangerous if it's the wrong decision. But the corporation you want, just for protection purposes alone, for tax benefits, if you're making usually at least, well, if you're making any kind of money, you want to have at least an LLC or something like that. If you start making into the 5 figures a year, like into tens of thousands a year, you might want to start looking at an S corporation. Now, an LLC can be taxed as an S corporation, but you need to treat it like an S corporation. So if all the accountant's doing is just checking a box saying tax as an S corporation on your LLC, but you're not treating it as such, same thing. If you get audited or you get sued, they're going to say, this is not legit. You either owe us money or you're going to get sued, and you're going to get sued as if it didn't exist. So you got to be careful. The cool thing is, let me teach you this part. One, if you're a sole proprietor, for those of you that are, if you're a sole proprietor, you are being taxed the highest taxes you could possibly be taxed. This is also true if you have an LLC. You are also being taxed as high as you possibly can. Yes, you can get write-offs that you wouldn't normally get, but your tax rate's higher. Why is that? One, you have income tax. We all know about income tax because you've been paying it your whole life pretty much, right? But there's also that Social Security tax, the FICA FUTA, that kind of stuff. For those of you that have a sole proprietor or you're an LLC, you pay both the income tax and the Social Security tax. That Social Security tax is 15.3%. 15.3. So if you've ever heard business owners say, I feel like I'm paying half my money to taxes, that's probably because they're not doing it right. Because think about it, if you're paying income tax, say you're at an income tax bracket of like 28 or even higher percent, plus you throw on 15% on top of that, you're paying over 40% on every dollar you make. And you'll say, wait, I'm a business owner, I'm supposed to have all these tax advantages, but why am I not getting them? Because it's not structured right. So if you're a sole proprietor, you're making any decent amount of money, I would suggest this. If you're making at least $5,000, $10,000 or more a year, that needs to change this year, like right now. Absolutely. I mean, it's probably costing you thousands upon thousands of dollars already. Because here's what can happen. Say you have an S corporation, and this can work if you have an LLC being checked as an S corporation and you're following all the guidelines. This can work too. So you might start with an LLC, but you can be taxed this way. But an S corporation, the nice thing about an S corporation is that you're two separate people. You have the corporation, then you have you as the employee. You're both the employer or the owner and the employee. You get taxed two different ways. So say, for example, you make $100,000 this year. Now you can split it. You can split your income where part of it's still the employee. Yes, you'll pay the 15.3% tax on this, but the owner draws, when you take money as an owner, that's not the salary, that has no 15.3%. That's 0% that you pay on that Social Security tax. And if you're young like I am, where I'm almost 40, you're probably not expecting a whole lot of Social Security, if any at all, right? So I'm not saying you don't pay into Social Security, but I want to pay the minimal amount possible. And so say we just split it 50-50, and this is different for everybody because you have different companies. This is where we need the CPA involved to be able to figure out what's your percentage. Let's say it's 50-50. $50,000 as the salary, $50,000 as the owner. Well, that means that $50,000 of that money, you're not paying 15.3%. That right there is saving you over $7,600 a year. That's almost $8,000 a year you save by doing nothing different but by how you pay yourself because of how the corporation works. And this is also true. Tax return for owner draw could be a dividend or an owner draw, either way, to answer that question on here for Camille. But that owner draw you take, that's 0% on that Social Security tax. What's awesome, I had this happen to me back in 2006. When I first set up my S Corporation back then, I was a sole proprietor for about 4 years, actually. Total sole proprietor. And then I remember 2005, I can't remember the exact tax bill, but I remember 2006. I made double the money in 2006 from 2005. But because I had that corporation, I paid half the taxes. Think about that. Double the income, but paid half the taxes of the previous year. That's like a 75% decrease in my tax bill. I was elated. I was thrilled. And the only difference was going from sole proprietor to a corporation. It really works. It's huge. Now, again, what kind of corporation you should have and everything else, it depends on what the attorney will say and also what we do work on with the accountant. Pretty cool stuff, huh? All right, who's ready to move on for the next one? Who wants more? All right, let's do it. Number 3. How many of you on here have children? Or be more specific, how many of you have children under the age of 17 and a half? Okay, you got 2, 3. All right. 2 for you as well, Kristen. Awesome. So this is one of my favorite ones. All right, because with this one, I've got 5 kids. As you can see in this picture, I've got 5 kids here. My youngest, as you can see in that picture, she has a little bit more curly hair now. She has her dad's hair, but she's actually now 3 years old. Now, people will ask me, they say, Chris, like I've heard that the minimum age to hire your kids is 8 years old or 9 years old or 12. Guess what? There is no minimum age. You can hire your child from birth. Now, here's the trick. Here's the key. You cannot hire them for something they can't do. So you got to hire them for a job that they can do. Well, what could somebody even like my 3-year-old do? I mean, obviously she can't do my books for me, right? She can't be an administrative assistant. She can't even write on the envelopes. Although I did have my oldest daughter, the one on the left there, I did have her do that. And she's more of an artist, so she actually drew little flowers and pictures on it too. So some of the people that got my book in the mail got a nice little surprise with some drawing on the front of their envelope. But I paid her for that. But my 3-year-old, well, what could I have my 3-year-old do? Well, obviously, right here, I'm using them in a picture. These guys are child models. They're being used in a presentation. I can hire them for being a photography model. I could hire them to be in videos. I could hire them in all kinds of things. Think about this. I mean, you guys remember Full House back in the 80s? Well, if you're old enough, you probably remember that show, right? You guys remember Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen? By the way, I used to think that was one person. I thought it was somebody from the South that had 4 names long. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, they both got hired for pretty much as babies to be in movies or be in the TV show. I bet you they made a lot of money, right? 3 of my kids actually got hired to be in a Bubble commercial last year. Seriously, one of our friends reached out to us and said, hey, we'd love to have your kids just come play in a park for 2 hours and play with our bubbles. It's for a new company. We'll do that and we'll pay your kids $12 an hour. Well, guess what? Well, this is Utah. I think they were kind of undercutting them on the pay a little bit. I think my kids are more talented playing with bubbles and in parks than $12 an hour. But could I easily justify $12 an hour because that's what they were hired to do? Yes. And so you can hire your kids for anything legitimately that they can do in the business, whatever it might be. Yes, it could be doing things with marketing. Yes, you could have them work at a booth. If you're doing you're sponsoring a table or something at an event or an expo, you can have them do all kinds of things. You can have them do janitorial work or things like that. I have one client right now where, as a chiropractor, he's hiring his 4 kids, and they have their own custodian business. And that custodian business, they're each paid in that business, or they're paid into the business. And in fact, we even bypass a little bit more taxes by paying the wife to then pay the kids, and then that pays into their business, and then that pays into the kids. And here's what's cool. That money can now be used to buy clothing, school, extracurricular activities, all the things you normally pay for your kids but you can't write off. Now you can. Because here's the cool thing. You can pay your kids up to about just over $6,000 a year. That's $6,000 a year tax-free. So think about this. I had one client in California. She was in a very large direct sales company. She's a very high leader in that. And she has 6 kids. And she said, wait, Chris, are you saying I can hire my kids, hire them as like contractors, or we can create a business or whatever it is for these kids. We can hire them, and you're saying I can write off about $6,000 per kid and pay no tax on that. I said, yes. She's like, that's $36,000 I'm writing off. Uh-huh. And what ended up happening? That saved her about almost $14,000 a year is what that saved her just by hiring her kids. And the coolest thing is, you're still bringing home the money. It's no different because that's still paying home expenses. But now you're getting a write-off for things you couldn't normally write off. You were normally being taxed that money, but now hiring your kids, you can actually hire them up to $6,000, and they can still make more, but they'll start paying taxes at that point. But about $6,000 a year that now you're able to write off as tax-free income. Isn't that pretty awesome? So, and do you hire them as employees or contractors? It would be more as contractors. You want to hire them more as business owners. So, pretty cool, huh? How many of you guys want to start paying your kids now? Yep, that's right. Yeah, and so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but yes, there's a lot of things you do with contract and everything else. You want to make sure it's legitimate, just like you hire any other contractor. So yes, they are 1099. But again, I always want to refer you to the CPA to make sure you talk to them first. So this is what I don't want you guys to do. I don't want you to keep overpaying again, right? I don't want you to keep paying more and more taxes unnecessarily. Ooh, can I give you one more tip? Can I give you one more bonus tip here? This one's kind of a cool one. If you have a home-based business, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one, but if you have a home-based business, realize that as a business owner, as a corporation, you could actually go and you can go get a venue. Like when I do my events, I do like my Wealth Empowerment Intensives. I'm doing about 3 of them next year. I'm actually cutting them down and doing some bigger, better events. But when I do my Wealth Empowerment Intensive, I go and reserve either a hotel or some sort of resort that I rent, right? And I'll pay a room fee. I'll pay for the audio visual, so I have to pay for the microphones. I got to pay for the speakers and for the projector and the screen and the whiteboards and everything else, plus the wireless internet. If you want to use wireless internet, I also pay for catering because I cater food into those events and everything else. I mean, I pay a good, pretty penny for people to come be in my events. Now, that's my corporation. I have my corporation do that. Oh, and by the way, cool, here's another, this is a PPS or PSS, whatever it is, PPS. If you're ever doing events, remember this, if you're doing events, if you're going to buy food, make sure you write off as events, not as meals and entertainment. Because meals and entertainment, you can only count 50% of whatever you spend. So if you spend $100 eating out, you're only writing off $50. But if you spend $100 for food in an event, some sort of event you do, it could be a mastermind or networking group or an actual business-related event somehow, that's 100% write-off. There's a little key bonus for you, just in case you want an extra there. Okay, now back to the PS. So anyways, I pay for venues as well, just to rent space. Here's the thing. You can also rent space, your corporation can rent space from you personally. This works only if you have a corporation. This does not work if you're a sole proprietor. So if you work out of your home, and even if you don't really work out of your home that much, but say you do, but you want to use your home for the use of one day, that money you're now paying as an expense in your business. Say you want to use it, because remember, when I use a venue, I write off the room, the space for the use of that room. I write off for catering, I write off for AV, the audio visual, for wireless internet, all that kind of stuff I pay for. Well, why couldn't you do that from your own home? And the cool thing is they actually made this tax code legal just about 3 years ago. This is what's interesting, is that I have not run into, there's only been 2 accountants I've heard teach this, and they're both accountants I refer to. And this is something I heard just back at the very beginning of 2013. Blew my mind, because I was paying a home office lease. But the cool thing, and let me explain how this works on the income side, now home office lease is rental income. You reduce a little bit of tax by doing that, but they're now auditing home office leases. So they said, we don't like home office leases as much anymore, so a little bit more picky on that one. But they did make this one easier, where they said, hey, you could do like a corporate rent agreement, where now you actually have your corporation pay you personally for the use of your space for 1 day's use. Now, for those of you guys that understand, real estate type of income, whenever you rent out more than 14 days a year, that's when you have to start paying that passive income tax, or that real estate income tax, as I call it. But if you stay under 14 days a year, that money is tax-free income. So let's just say, for example, that you're renting their space for 1 day per month. That's 12 days a year. And you use the Marriott's. If you look at the standard, this is what our CPAs found when they did the research on this. They said, hey, the Marriott, for a room that's typical, they can be comparable to somebody using their own home for the space, for the AV, for the wireless internet, for the food, catering, which you have in your fridge, all that stuff. That could easily be justified for $1,250 a month. That's $1,250 a month. If you did that for 12 days out of the year, that's $15,000 a year you can take as income tax free because you didn't go over that 14-day mark. Now, the number just varies depending. Every area can be different. Again, everything with tax write-offs has to be justified. Can you verify it? Can you document it? Can you make it work? And yes, you do need a contract, just like you do with any hotel. You need a contract that says, hey, my corporation, which I use my S corporation, my corporation then goes and pays Chris Miles for the use of that space for that 1 day. Now, for many of you at the end of the year, you might have some catching up to do. And that's where we might want to make sure we're very strategic about how we do this, because you can start paying the rest of your income for the rest of this year income tax free. Maybe you pay yourself $15,000 or whatever for the rest of this year. Now you've got that much money in taxes. And depending on your tax bracket, what does that mean, $15,000? This means that you'll save anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 a year just by doing this one strategy alone. That's it. These next couple months can be vital to saving at least that much on your tax bill next year. And if you don't even have a tax bill, that means that's that much more in a refund you could be getting next year. Even if you have a job, you could be using these business expenses to offset the money you're paying on taxes on that job. And even we can even adjust your W-2s on that job, whether it's you or your spouse, adjust that to make sure you're taking more money home each and every paycheck. So then you can go apply that towards paying down credit cards, build up savings, putting in your business, whatever is the best use of that money to be able to make more money right now. Is that pretty sweet or what? Type in, tell me this, like, oh man, that was so sweet. Awesome. There we go, there's a sweet. All right, good. So again, I don't want you guys to get overpaid. This is why I do this at the end of the year, because everybody wants to procrastinate. And here's the reality. Most of you are probably not going to do anything. That's the sad reality. I see it every single year. And people are like, oh, that was cool. You might do a little bit. You'll say, that's a great idea, Chris. That was awesome. But then you'll go to your accountant and they'll say, yeah, I don't know. And they'll say this because it's not their idea and they're afraid of losing business. They'll say, I don't think you could do that. You'll probably get audited for doing these things. Here's the thing. You're getting audited whether you do something legal or not, probably, right? The thing is, if you can do this legitimately, they've got nothing. And you have to have an accountant that's going to do it right. You're going to have an accountant that's actually going to say, no, we got your butt covered. This is completely legitimate. Here's the exact tax code to do that corporate rent or whatever that might be using your office space. All that kind of stuff you can do legitimately. But unfortunately, you go back to your accountant and they'll say, no, you can't do that. I've actually heard accountants say that in front of rooms, and then they say, well, maybe. I'm not sure if you can. I'm not sure how. Even the ones that are more open-minded still don't get how to do it, even though it's right there in the tax code. But that's the thing, is that accountants can't always keep up with it. They're trying to deal with all your work and everything else, and they don't even spend time educating you to even know if you can do this. In fact, how many of you already have learned more in these last few minutes than you've learned from your accountant? Exactly. See? And I'm not even an accountant. I don't even get it all. Like, I don't want to get it. I hate being a numbers cruncher. I like to do it with cash flow. I like the big picture. I like the coordination and everything, but I do not like having to be somebody that just inputs numbers all day long. That's not me. So that's the cool thing, is that I don't want you overpaying again. So you need to have more than just an accountant. You need an active accountant, not a passive one, but an active one. You have the right people. You need to have the right team around you. Because when you have a team, they have that synergy. That synergy is better than just one. It's like peanut butter and chocolate, right? You put them together. Peanut butter is awesome, chocolate's awesome, but you put them together and that 1 + 1 = 3, doesn't it? Right? You want to have that together. You want to have the right team. Imagine if you could have an attorney and an accountant actually get along and agree and say, hey, we're going to work together to create this. Make sure you have the right corporation and you're getting the best tax benefits possible for your situation. That's something you just never find. It took me 10 years to even get that perfect combination of those people because I have a whole team around me that does that. And so here's what I'm offering to you guys that are on this. Now, because I've already had some people doing some reviews recently, we've got limited manpower on this. And so some of you might have to be a little bit patient. But what we're going to do is we're going to open this up. And for those of you who I know are watching the recording, we're going to open this up to about 12 people only to do a review. Here's the people that you should, if you're this type of person, I'm going to say here's a few things to know. You're probably likely overpaying on taxes, guaranteed. One, if you're making any money this year, you're overpaying taxes probably by at least $3,000 a year. That's probably given. If you're making six figures, like over $100,000 or more a year, you're probably overpaying at least $10,000 plus a year in taxes. That's the crazy part, but that's what we find every time. Like I said, my average client finds at least $5,000 to $10,000 a year minimum, and that's even if they have a decent accountant. You know, like a decent accountant will find at least $5,000. If they have the typical accountant, like most people have, which it might be good people, but just doing the usual thing, $10,000 is not too unlikely. So if you're making more money this year, I can assure you your tax bill is going to be higher unless we take some strategies. We might be able to make the tax bill lower if we do this before the end of the year. And by the way, if you got to set up corporations and stuff, this does take time. Even though I had my attorney pull out some favors some people because they waited till the last week of December, do not count that I'll ever work. You might have to wait a whole nother year to get these tax benefits. So you want to be starting this month, like right now. This is why I'm doing the webinar right now, so you have time in case we need to change some things on the corporation. Two, if you're new in business and you have other work, so like I mentioned, if you've got like a W-2 job, whether you or your spouse does, but you've got a business and you might be new in business too, this is something you might want to take advantage of. I've got some people, I actually met with somebody here just last week where he just quit his job. He's now launching into his own consulting business. His wife also has a business too, but he's also got an old 401k. It's got like $90,000 in it. I told him, I said, hey, one, we could probably make some additional money with that money. We could actually maybe do some real estate investing or something like that to give you some extra income. But two, what if we could use that 401k money you can use to help launch your business, but we use it the right way where we could avoid a 10% penalty and avoid the tax hit as well, to where we can make it a wash on your taxes. And imagine this, I mean, $90,000, if you're getting hit with like 35% total taxes, you lose a third of that, that's $30,000 bucks. What if we could avoid most of that tax? That could save them easily $20,000 plus dollars. So those kind of things is the kind of stuff that we want to do. And if we could turn it to income, especially if we can put it in business, even better. So if you have other work, we can offset your taxes that you're paying through your work. And like I said earlier, you can home more money every paycheck. If you got the wrong corporate structure, which is the case for a lot of people, even if you have the right one, but you're not using it correctly, we want to make sure we want to get that done. Just like I said, I mean, we've changed so many people's corporate structures that's been amazing, the kind of benefits people have gotten. If you have a passive accountant, like I mentioned, if you have somebody that is a number cruncher, they're good people, but they're just not getting the education, you're probably overpaying in taxes. And so, again, like I said before, the first 12 people that say, hey, Chris, I would love to have a review, make sure that we are not overpaying our taxes. We'd love to see what we can do there, what's available. Just email me, chris@moneyripples.com. And the first 12 people that do that will say, great, we'll get you in, we'll get you set up. Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have somebody be able to reach back out to you for that. But yeah, email me at chris@moneyripples.com. Let's see what we can do, because I love it. One of my favorite things every year is that when people come and they take action on the advice that we do, and then they're like, hey, Chris, I just saved $6,000 or $12,000 or $15,000, or some have saved $30,000 or $40,000. Like I had an attorney and a teacher, ironically from New York. We actually saved them like over $30,000 bucks just in taxes alone, plus other things like cash flow. It ended up being over $40,000 bucks in a year, all because it came to me right at the right time at the end of this year, just like this. So don't delay. You definitely want to do this for sure. So email me, chris@moneyripples.com. Definitely, there's other questions you have. We can answer some of those questions here. Again, I appreciate your time. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you got at least one good idea. But ideally, not only you have get good ideas, but actually take action on those ideas and actually see money come back, so you have more cash flow, which creates more time and more freedom. So you feel like you own your life. You don't own a job. You own your business. You own your life. You have control. You have that freedom that you always wanted. Thanks for your time, everybody. You've been awesome. We'll see you around.